Hi everyone, this is DeFi Dad. Today I'm going to walk you through a tutorial on Zapper.fi. So this is like a DeFi dashboard, similar in some sense to what Yearn does, but one of the added bonuses is the fact that they have DeFi Zaps, and that is under this Invest tab, which allows me to add liquidity to earn fees, incentives, voting rights, and more. And so the idea is that they've taken away the complication of having to go and seek out different DeFi protocols, and they've put hundreds of liquidity providing opportunities all in this one dashboard. And so you can look across Uniswap v2, Curve, and Balancer, and then you can choose which pool according to what assets you have in order to become a liquidity provider and start earning market making fees and other incentives depending on what pool you're hopping into. The first thing you're going to want to do with Zapper.fi is get your wallet connected so that you can see all of this rich information that I've got to look at based on the assets and the DeFi apps that I'm interacting with. So I'm going to go ahead and click on manage addresses, and then I could type in, something like DeFi dad.eth, or I could paste in the hexadecimal, 0x address that goes with every Ethereum wallet. Then I've got the ability to navigate between these different wallets just by clicking on them. So you can see a breakdown of my account according to what's in my wallet versus what's in liquidity pools, what's participating in yield farming versus what might be involved in investments. So if I'm participating in DYDX and I've got a leverage position open, this is where it would show up versus a liquidity pool like Uniswap. If I've got an ETH DAI liquidity provision in Uniswap, this is where I would find that. Further down, you can see a breakdown of your assets across different platforms. They do a really good job of keeping up with all of the new DeFi apps and platforms that are releasing. So I tend to find that if someone releases a major DeFi app, it shows up here within a few days. And then lastly, I can see a breakdown of my asset allocation across these different categories versus where my assets are according to what platform they're in. If you flip the little switch view, you can actually see a breakdown of all of your assets. This is always really helpful. I think at the end of the day, it's really difficult to keep track of multiple Ethereum wallet addresses, and it's difficult to keep track of where that money is if you start to participate in lots of different DeFi opportunities. An extension of these dashboard portfolio tracking capabilities is the Explore tab. So you can hop into like, how is my money allocated in something like synthetics? So in this case, it looks like, by the way, this is a portfolio that someone was kind enough to make public as well. It's DeFiPortal.eth. So if you ever want to see an example of a DeFi portfolio, you can just paste this into Zapper.fi. So you notice below I've got SDFi and I've got SUSD. And then there is a total of 10 SNX that's been collateralized, and there's synth debt. If you're unfamiliar with synthetic, synth debt refers to after you collateralize SNX and you mint SUSD, you're holding synths. And those synths are below in the form of SDFi and SUSD, which adds up to $1.55 in synth debt. So I would go here and populate, your wallet and take a look at the different opportunities. It's a cool way to visualize all of this, and the possibilities are endless here. There's so many DeFi apps that they're now helping people to better understand how they're invested. The last feature to call out here in the portfolio tracking utility that I find in Zapper.fi is the ability to navigate transactions. And so you can go here and you can search based on what protocol, what token it was. So if I look up SNX, here, I can quickly find that. This is much easier to use than what you'll find on something like Etherscan. And Etherscan, I don't want to compare the two because Etherscan is very powerful and has lots of other utility that we're very dependent on. But here's a list of all of my transactions. It's just a little bit harder to navigate. And in terms of finding tokens in my wallet, you know this this is this is helpful, but I would argue that what you see here on the Zapper.fi dashboard obviously is much more visually pleasing. So this is a tab that I always keep open, and I think it just allows me to better understand where my money is and how it's being put to work in DeFi. The rest of the video, I'm just going to focus on what are Zaps. So if you click on the invest button, this is where I can find all of the different liquidity providing opportunities that are available in DeFi. And what's kind of incredible is I know there's at least over, at this point, there's over 380 opportunities in here. So they do a really great job of keeping up with uh, all the new pools that have come out, and also trying to keep up with what are the most popular pools in DeFi across Balancer, Curve, and Uniswap. Now, in order to understand why a Zap is powerful, let me give you an example of what you previously had to do before these Zaps existed. So if I were going to become a liquidity provider in Curve, I had to know to go to curve.fi/yearn/deposit. Then, after I went through, let's say, 2 steps here of depositing DAI, I would then want to stake that Curve token, let's say with the Wi-Fi yield farming opportunity through ygov.finance. And so then I would have to go to this website and I would have to stake it. And I would have to know to go to this website. It just wasn't super clear how to do all of these things and to navigate across different platforms. And there's been some other shortcuts created just by Curve in this example. Like they've done us some favors and put in a staking option. But my point is this, is instead of me having to navigate across Balancer, Curve, interfaces like Minter for synthetics, and Uniswap, Zappers put that all into one place for me. So let's go ahead and reconnect to my MetaMask here. So you can see a number of the investments I'm in at DeFiDad.eth. You can see that I have money in the Y Curve pool. I have money in the SBTC Curve pool. I've got money in a Balancer pool with USDC and MUSD. And then I've also recently put a tokenized Bitcoin into Balancer. And that's also another opportunity where I'm a liquidity provider. One of the most major risks for me to be conscious of in using Zapper is around slippage. Now, I can mitigate my risk against losing a lot of money to slippage by clicking on the little widget icon up in the top right. You can choose your slippage tolerance, which is the maximum percentage you are willing to lose due to unfavorable price changes. So, in this case, they have 2 or 3%, or I could even lower it to, let's say, 1%. In order for someone to get into these pools, all they have to do is scroll down below and they can start to look through these different pools that are available. And you can rank these according to how liquid they are. So going into a more liquid pool could mean potentially less rewards, but also potentially, I'm not going to say safer, but let's just say that liquidity indicates that others are there. So clearly there's a reason that there's so much liquidity here in the Y curve pool. And if I want to become a liquidity provider in the Y curve pool, I can just click add liquidity. And here's where the real magic comes into play. A Zap allows me to start from tokens in my wallet that might not be in the pool. So if I were going to become a participant or a liquidity provider in the Y curve pool, I need one of these 4 stable coins. Otherwise, I can't become a liquidity provider. Zapper allows me to start with other tokens that I already have in my wallet. And so in this case, I've got ETH DAI or USDC, but you notice ETH is the one that isn't already there. So if I were to put in one ETH, well, now I'm saving myself time and I'm saving myself money to not have to go and swap out that ETH for one of the stable coins. By the way, when I start with a token that is not one of the pool assets, so in this example, if it's not one of these, it means that Zapper is going to use, I believe it's Kyber, they're going to use Kyber to swap my ETH for one of those 4 stable coins. And so it's going to end up costing me something there. Like, just be aware, it's not like they're absorbing that cost. There's swap fees involved, and then there's some gas involved in that. What's really powerful though about this is if I'm starting with ETH, I'm going to be able to swap ETH for those stable coins in Curve and become a liquidity provider all in a single transaction, because I don't have to give permission for them to move an ERC20 token. Normally, if I start with something like DAI, I always have to give permission to move my DAI, and then the second transaction that Zapper will request from me, just like Curve would, is going to be the actual deposit of my token. So, approval to move DAI followed by executing the deposit of DAI. When we go back to Zapper, if I start with ETH, this is going to be a single transaction. So if I were to execute this right now, what would happen is my ETH would get swapped with Kyber in the background. And then from there, those tokens would be deposited into Curve. And that's why gas costs this much. It's not just because of gas prices. It actually has more to do with the fact that they're consolidating 3 transactions into one. But it saves me a tremendous amount of time. And there are moments where I do find that I'm saving on gas as well. This was a time before we moved to such high gas prices. But nonetheless, 3 transactions consolidated to one. So let's re-summarize how these Zaps work. I go to the Invest tab, and according to what tokens I might already have in my wallet or tokens I want exposure to, I can go and search here. So let's pretend I want exposure to SNX. Well, there's an SNX ETH pool in Uniswap. There's an SNX USDC pool in Balancer, and so on. There's lots and lots of pools here. And if I want to participate in this SNX ETH pool in Uniswap, I can click on Add Liquidity. And whether or not I have SNX or ETH, I can choose an asset in my wallet. So let's say I'm going to put in 1 ETH. And then this is going to allow me to become a liquidity provider in this Uniswap pool. Before I get started with becoming a liquidity provider based on the different opportunities that are here in Zapper.fi, there's a few questions that I should be asking myself. I always think about, what assets do I have that I want to put to work? So that's easy. I look at my wallet, and let's pretend that I have DAI. I know that I can then participate in this pool, if it weren't for the fact that I wouldn't touch wifey too with a 10-foot pole. But if I was wanting to participate in a pool with DAI, I know that that's a potential opportunity for me. Second, if I want exposure to a token that I don't already have, well, that's another consideration. So let's pretend that I want exposure to Lend. Well, if I go here and I add liquidity, I might be starting with ETH, but by the time I've added this, I'm going to end up with exposure to both Lend and ETH. And it's going to be in a 50-50 ratio. This is a good way for me to retain 50% exposure of this total value in ETH, and then gain some exposure to Lend while earning market making fees. A third consideration is whether I want to get involved in a yield farming opportunity. So what I've described so far has really been, am I going to jump into Balancer and become a liquidity provider? am I going to jump into Curve and become a liquidity provider, which it may or may not have uh, a yield farming program associated with it. The Y pool does. So just by hopping into that, I'm technically yield farming because I'm earning interest and market making fees, and I'm earning the future Curve token. And then the last one is Uniswap. The reason I call out this consideration of yield farming is notice above here, there is the SBTC Curve pool. This is a pool in Curve where I'm still a market maker with exposure to REN BTC, Wrapped BTC, and SBTC in the pool. But aside from the swap fees that I earn, I'm also being paid by Synthetics with a rewards program. And so I'm earning SNX, I'm earning the REN token, I'm also earning some balancer pool swap fees, and I'm earning the future Curve token. So if this were an opportunity that were interesting to me, I've got some extra controls available. Notice that I have 0.0494 tokens available to claim as rewards. So because I'm in Zapper.fi, I don't have to then go to Minter, which is a tool that is powered by Synthetics. So this is a tool that we normally use for staking in Synthetics, but you'd have to know that. You'd have to know to go to the LP rewards tab. You'd have to know to click on Curve SBTC, and then you'd have to know that you can claim those rewards and know that you shouldn't claim an unstake if you want to remain in the pool. So it's a lot of information to keep track of versus keeping track of it all here on Zapper and being able to just click claim rewards, just like so. So Zapper.fi is really empowering me to do everything in one place. And more so than I would argue than any other dashboard that interacts with liquidity providing opportunities. There's so many different things you can do with Zapper. It's hard to cover it all in a single video, but I'll call out one last thing as they're always adding new features. So we talked about the fact that you can add liquidity, you can withdraw liquidity, you can stake in certain cases. So if I put my money into the SBTC pool with Curve, then they issue me an LP token, a liquidity provider token, and then I have staked it previously. So I can also unstake it. And then I can also claim my rewards until the end of that program. They just recently added this rebalance feature. So I can click on the wrapped Bitcoin and REN BTC balancer pool, which has a 50-50 ratio of the two. And if I click on rebalance, keep in mind, I have 1 Bitcoin worth of value in this pool right now, which is equivalent to 50 balancer pool tokens. So let's pretend that I wanted to move half of the value. I could say, let's move 25 balancer pool tokens into Uniswap, and let's move it into the USDC ETH pool. I could be doing this because maybe I want more exposure to Ether and I want to take profits on this and have some more stable coin. These are all tools that are really powerful for me to be able to use that are saving me from having to go do lots of manual individual transactions. So let's do a recap of all of the risks involved. Uh, First off, when it comes to the dashboard, there's really nothing for me to call out. Uh, I would say make sure that you bookmark Zapper.fi, F-I at the end. Make sure you bookmark it because my fear is in the future that someone will create a website where maybe it's got an extra I at the end. And the goal is to fish for, access to your wallet and to confuse people who are newcomers. So it's always good to bookmark any crypto related website so that you don't end up getting phished on a scammer website. The risk involved in the invest tab where all of the liquidity providing opportunities are, it's pretty much the same as the risk involved in working with Balancer, Curve, or Uniswap. Each one of these 3 platforms has its own smart contract risk. So if you use a Zap, I mean, just know that the end result is you are exposing yourself to the smart contracts on each of these websites. And so that means that I might want to buy cover on Nexus Mutual. It also means that if there were a bug in any one of these three websites, my funds could be in danger. Another thing is the smart contract risk of just working with Zapper.fi. What they're doing is shuttling you from whatever token you start with to becoming a liquidity provider in these different pools. But there is smart contract risk in getting there. And if there were a bug involved in one of those Zaps, that would put my funds at risk. Another thing to consider is that Zapper.fi hasn't decentralized into a DAO yet. So you still have admin risk there in terms of what controls the team has and making sure that no one can ever get control of these Zaps or the Zapper.fi website. One of the most major risks for me to be conscious of in using Zapper is around slippage. Now, I can mitigate my risk against losing a lot of money to slippage by clicking on the little widget icon up in the top right. You can choose your slippage tolerance, which is the maximum percentage you are willing to lose due to unfavorable price changes. So, in this case, they have 2 or 3%, or I could even lower it to, let's say, 1%. All right, now if we go below and we look for a really illiquid pool, let's try this Link USDC pool. So it only has $7,500 of liquidity. So me adding even like 5 Ether should hugely impact the price, and it's going to affect the price of the pool assets that I'm gaining exposure to. So if I go to add liquidity, and let's add 4.5 ETH or so, and then if I hit confirm, notice it says error. Try reloading the page or increasing your slippage tolerance. So this is intentional to prevent me from doing something that I will regret. If I put all of that Ether value into this pool, I'm going to hugely affect the price of Link and USDC in the pool. So the moral of the story here is you really need to make sure that you look at the widget icon and choose what is your slippage tolerance. This is a very, very, very important step to prevent any sort of like disastrous zap that would cause you huge price slippage. By the way, I'll cover this in a future video. There's a thing that we refer to as impermanent loss. It means that I start out 50-50 here, but if the price of lend skyrockets, people are buying lend. And as a market maker, I'm taking the opposite trade. So that means I'm selling my lend. And that's important that you understand that, because if you're a liquidity provider, you're taking that opposite trade. And so if I would be upset to see my exposure to lend continually decrease while the price of lend is increasing and going higher and higher, it's probably not the right strategy for me. Instead, I could find a pool where maybe there's 80% lend and 20% WETH. Then I'm reducing my quote unquote impermanent loss with lend, even if the price of lend is skyrocketing. And then the last thing I consider is exposure to all of these pegged assets. So for example, you can see up above, I'm exposed to Wrapped Bitcoin and Ren BTC. The Curve pool has 4 different stable coins, including DAI, USDC, TrueUSD, and Tether. I've got SBTC also involved here, and MUSD, which is a basket of stable coins. So if any one of these pegs were to fail, that would not be a good thing as well. And so that's risk that I have to consider. All right, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you find this helpful. If you have any questions about Zapper.fi, feel free to comment on YouTube or on my Twitter. Also, the team has a Discord group for Zapper.fi. You can find it at their website, Zapper.fi. It's a really helpful team. So if you do have questions, they tend to be very responsive in Discord. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.